dozens and dozens of people who will actually watch this or listen to this. This is our final discussion on A Gentleman in Moscow, written by Bolo.
Amor Towles.
Amor Towles. Okay, I was very confused how to pronounce the last name.
Amor
Sure,
Towles.
Yeah.
So we will go with whatever we
So,
Yes.
You can even say
so
towels.
essentially, what we can do is someone can give a very short summary of the book, and then we can take it from there. So
Cool. I'll go.
Great.
So the book starts with a very nice couplet of a poem written by Count Alexander Rostov.
That is Pratul, by the way, and it is his Zoom account that is making all of this possible.
Who is introduced to us in the first chapter as a person who has been sentenced to arrest for life in the Metropolitan Hotel. Then it starts with a feeling that he comes from a very affluent background. He lives in the room number 317, which is one of the grandest room in Hotel Metropolitan. Then he's taken out and put in sort of a cupboard that reminded me of how Harry Potter used to live under the staircase. Sorry for the analogy, but yeah, that's how it was for me. Then he gets stuck, and that the notion of him being stuck in that room hits him hard. Then he goes up and gets his ambassador. That's his table, and that plays a very crucial part in his life. So he gets that in his room, and he starts his fresh life.
Count Alexander Rostov is the protagonist of the story, and the story is told in a third-person perspective. So it starts with Count being in house arrest. He has been put in house arrest by the Bolshevik party, that is the current ruling party in the Russian government. And Count is from a family of aristocrats.
That is Anu, by the way, probably the most passionate reader in the group right now.
His crime is that he's an aristocrat. So they have put him in house arrest in the Metropole Hotel, and they have, taken away the luxury suite that he was living in and made him stay in a small room up in the attic. And so he gathers whatever positions that he feels are the most close to him: his desk, his ambassador, his glassware, and he goes up to attic and he sets them, and that's how the book starts. So
In a 100 square feet room, right?
yes, in a 100
Yes.
square feet room with a small window, the size of an invitation. Right, that's one of the work.
The size of the window is comparable to many small objects in the
So
first
what?
few paragraphs of the book.
Initially, in the first week, we read the first 50 pages, and everything he described was all about the room, the little things, what he ate for breakfast, all the little things described in so much detail. So initially we were like कि ये book में सिर्फ यही होने वाला है क्या कि room के बारे में, window के बारे में, क्या खा रहा है, क्या पी रहा है. तो even though the lines were written very beautifully, but then initially we thought कि यही होगा. So initially, as the story progressed, it is the Count's life inside that hotel. Now he has been put in house arrest for the rest of his life. So how he proceeds, how his life progresses inside the hotels, whom he meets, what he does, his attitudes, his behavior, how life progresses inside the hotel, that is what the book is about, and it has been set in a historical background. Now, Russia at this point of time, it is at a very historic moment in time where the Bolsheviks have come up. They have overthrown the Tsars and they are in current party. And outside, many historical events are happening. The First World War has happened, and Stalin government, people are getting shipped, the distant people are getting shipped off to Siberia. And all these things are happening in the background. And the story is told as if how the historical events happening in the background, the little effects are shown in the hotel, even though it's not affecting the Count's life in a big way, but they're still in the background. It's happening.
Essentially about the life of the Count Rostov inside the Metropole Hotel. And that is me, Piyush Hatwane, who is actually editing this podcast right now. The characters that he meet, the friends he make, and the experiences he shares with all the people, all the guests that come in and go out of the Metropole Hotel.
timeline, maybe you can say it starts from
Yes.
1917
It
to
starts from
1960.
1917 and goes off to
I think
1953 or
24,
56, whatever.
55, I think 55.
55. That
It
is,
goes
the
up to
count is
1955.
33 years old when he's put in house arrest. And he's 65 years old
Yes. Yeah.
in the end.
So, yeah.
So it basically speaks about the entire time frame and all the adventures that happens in his life during that period. And
Yeah.
totally unexpected events that could happen even when you're put in a house arrest inside a hotel with very limited opportunity for stuff to happen.
And that is Vivek, the glue that is holding the entire Core 22 group together.
But then I
So,
would disagree with Vivek on it. I think Metropole is one of the historic historic places in Russia where many things have happened. Like people from various backgrounds have come there. They have, they wrote the constitution there. That's what it says. Many big meetings that happen. So I think it's a juncture of human history where things have actually happened. So I think Metropole is a place like where things can actually happen.
It can happen, but imagine any normal hotel worker in maybe some Ritz or some other hotels that that has been mentioned in the book. Like they would not have the same level of experiences or even the kind of perspective about that hotel that we could actually gain from this book.
Yeah, I think it also comes from the fact that the Count is like he's a born aristocrat. He first experienced the hotel as a guest for 4 years, I think, before he was put
Yes.
on house arrest before he was put on house arrest, he had already lived there in the most royal room, like the most royal guest for 4 years, I think. So that also gives the depth to his character and how he speaks about the hotel and how his experiences mature over time.
that is Aishwarya, by the way, who showed great feat of self-control by not spoiling the book for the last 1 month when we were reading it.
Yeah. So now let's go ahead and discuss the book, Ashwarya.
Yeah. I basically had a few questions that probably everyone can try to answer. And I think the discussion can go from there, right? The first question is why Russia, why 1920, and why Metropole Hotel? Would the novel still would have worked if it was set in some other time at some other place? Or why did the writer chose to set it exactly where it did? Would it have worked if it was set somewhere else? Or yeah, basically that is
I think it
question.
could have worked, but also that set of scenarios would also have to be like equally complicated or with that much texture to be able to give the book what it needs. Like if you put it, let's say in COVID impacted America or somewhere, then maybe it could have some sort of an impact. But if you put it like in a normal day in a normal city, then probably it wouldn't have that much impact. But I think the choice that the writer made over here made it like very like much more impactful and much more interesting. I think the background story that was set helped the book a lot. So to find alternate kind of a situation in which the book would work would be very hard. Like especially now that we've already read so much about it, it's ingrained in our heads. Maybe that's what gives me the bias. But I still think that it's quite unparallelable. Very nice. I feel like
want to add to
the
that.
details.
In this, I feel it is the change of an era, right?
Yes,
it is
exactly.
The change of an era. It is the time of in Russia where the era is changing. The Tsars, the rulers, the aristocrats, they have been overthrown by the Communist Party. A new era has come up. Their rules, their lifestyle. So I read somewhere, imagine a woman who was born in 1900s in Germany. She must experience she must experience so many things in history. The First World War, the Second World War. So her life
The
would
Holocaust.
be like so itne sare political events, so historical events have happened in her lifetime. So I think this is that era for Russia, right? When the Tsars who were ruling till now, they have been overthrown, the Bolsheviks have come up. Then there is the First World War, there is the Second World War, right? So much of historical events are happening, and the era is just on the verge. It is changing. So here we see the change, right? There's a mention of manager says like now my employees will not be addressing you as your excellency, right? Now the count suddenly feels, what kind of world is this where you will not be addressed by your titles? But now for us people, we don't address anybody. We just call them sir, ma'am. For us, the profession is the respect, right? You're a doctor, you're respected. You're a lawyer, you're whatever. The profession is the respect. We don't respect anybody for their hereditary ancestry, right? So that is the cusp. It is on the verge of changing. So I think the story would work even if it's a similar background where there's a very historical events are happening, the era is changing, and a man who was in the past era, he has to adjust to the new era.
But I still think that it's very difficult for a similar setting to happen, because what has happened is not just a change of era, but also after the change of the era, it's also shown that there is a loss of confidence in the new government that has come in, and a lot of intricate details that they've removed everything that showed basically relevance to the past also. Like, I'm just exactly comparing same to same. So for that to happen, it's very difficult, because very few places who actually had that roller coaster of a ride. So like, maybe you can say Germany, but in there, the Jews are the people who have suffered. For them, they did have a low, but they could never again get back up.
And another thing is, I think at least after 1900s, Russian Revolution is the only revolution that succeeded. Basically, they actually overthrew the government and
the civil war.
The French Revolution, one thing happened before 1900. Second thing, that the results of many of the results of the revolution were reversed back after a few years of the revolution. Although I don't know much about the French Revolution, that is what I
would say.
That's older, right?
That is pretty old.
They're
the
all
French Revolution,
French Revolution, American Revolution. There are older eras.
So, like, what I want to explore is that, suppose, say, the setting would have been something else. Suppose the setting would have been, say, someone in a house arrest. So I think, like, house arrest or geographical confinement is the one of the major, like, plot devices in the story.
Yeah,
right?
It's a sentence also. Russia was one of the first countries to discover exile in their own home country.
So it's how a lot of white collar criminals are given house arrest. So maybe that can be a scenario where you've not done a physical crime or a very extreme crime like that, but I've seen a lot of financial criminals and such people, they are put under house arrest for smaller durations.
The only person, like real person, that I know is under house arrest is A.Q. Khan, the person who basically made Pakistan the nuclear power. So he stole nuclear secrets from some European countries and then came to Pakistan.
I was not aware of that.
The way I was thinking, could the book have worked if the protagonist was A.Q. Khan and he would have been in a hotel in Karachi instead of his home somewhere, right? And I think it could have. I think the reason it was Russia was because the author knows a lot about Russian history.
I think I read a little bit background there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it started with when this author visited Metropole for something for his professional conference or something. And there, when he was walking down the halls of that grand Metropole hotel, it just came in a flash. That's what he actually wrote gave in the interview. It came in a flash. What would a life of a person be who has to live in this hotel for a lifetime? That's how the idea came up, and then author worked on that idea. That's how it came.
But in real, though, none of the counts or none of the aristocrats were in a house arrest.
House arrest was a fashionable form of punishment in Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure exactly in this particular hotel if someone was in house arrest for this amount of time. But there were house arrests in Russia, and it mentions in the book as well that I think Anu Arve just quoted, right? So the author compares this to many of the criminals who are crime against the government. They are exiled from the country and they live in some other country, right? But
recently also there was a ban, right? I think it's Pussy Galore or something like that, who were put under house arrest first in Russia.
I'm not sure.
I'm not.
So this whole Metropolis hotel is filled with people who were in house arrest.
No.
It's a normal hotel, like grand hotel, just a Ritz, any kind of grand hotel. But the count has been put in house arrest in that hotel. Like you have to
There.
live in
So
that.
that's
So he was the only prisoner there.
Yes.
yeah. It's also because he used to live at
There,
Metropole earlier also. Like he didn't have a house. He just had a suite in Metropole where he lived like continuously for 4 years. Which is
Mhm.
common for a lot of rich people even now. They just
They don't live
book a
in
suite
the
and they
palaces.
live there.
So basically, I think the background here is Count had his villa in a place called Idlehour or somewhere, and once
Yeah.
the revolution came, they had to vacate it because the people were coming and destroying the properties of the aristocrats. So he helped his grandmother, who was his only living relative there, to get away, and then he himself stayed in the hotel, right? For since he was alone, he had nobody else. He himself stayed in the Metropole Hotel, which is one of the finest hotels in all of Russia, and he was staying in a luxurious suite for 4 years. And then a trial happened. They came up with a poem that Count had written then, and he was sentenced to
So
house
I have
arrest
a
in the same.
question. So was he? I think he was saved by the poem,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Not.
Actually,
Yes,
he
yes,
and
yes,
Vivek
yes.
Yeah.
That is what I wanted
Huh.
to clarify as well.
Yeah.
So
He was
he
saved.
was to be shot dead because he was an aristocrat. But
Okay.
because the poem that he wrote was a call to action for the revolution.
Are you sure it
That
was
guy.
for?
Yes,
Because me and
yes,
Vivek
Yeah,
were
because
just
yes,
arguing
yes,
on that.
yes. It was a call to action for the revolution, one thing.
Okay.
Second thing, during the trial, he did not came out as someone who has advantaged a lot being an aristocrat. He just came out as a person of superior wit. He never accepted blame. So that was the
also
reason
guys,
he was not killed, but rather he was put into house arrest at
house arrest.
Metro.
Also, guys, how did you
Yeah.
guys feel when you read that Mishka wrote the poem?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
basically, he was
And
saved
then-
because I was confused. Me and Vivek just had a heated discussion just before this call because Vivek finished the book in the last moment. So I asked him, then he's like, because I thought that poem got him. That is the reason he was sent to the
Yeah.
house.
Okay. Wait. Let me come back to it later. Right. The
Okay.
first question is, what plot points in the book were actual real surprises to you?
Okay.
Mishka
Of course,
wrote
this was
poem.
one probably for everyone, right?
Yes,
What
maybe
else?
Vivek
There was
can.
one more for me, but what else
Yes.
was for
Maybe
you guys?
maybe you can start.
Yeah. So for me, the other surprise was that the Count did not leave Russia. Rest of the things where there was a backdrop, there was a foreshadowing of everything else. The Casablanca, the fact that this American whatever
Yeah.
CIA guy is
Richard,
introduced
Richard,
well
yeah.
ahead in the Richard. He's introduced in the thing.
Early,
Then
like
the fact
relatively
that
early
Sophia
book.
gets to perform in the Paris, and Count actually pushes her to actually go there and not stay in Metropole, right? So those backdrop created all those things. ठीक है, ये तो होने वाला है end में. And Casablanca, obviously. Casablanca, the movie was.
Gossip. Because it has such big reference. Like in the end, the guy says round up the suspects. I was like, ooh, you have to watch Casablanca to understand that.
That was a cool move. But that was the one surprise that I had. That he did not leave Russia, and second one was obviously that Count did not write the poem. Mishka is the one who did. So what are the surprises that you guys really had in the?
But I actually would have expected for him to not leave Russia because he was a true blue Russian person. Like I like the way he's portrayed in the book and stuff like that. I can actually imagine how he would not want to leave the country. Like even when he sent like his grandmother away, so he came back because he said that there's nothing else in the world for me other than Russia. So I would imagine how that would be the thing, and the way he speaks about Idlehour when he meets that guy on the terrace.
The terrace, yes, yeah.
So it sort of shows his attachment and how he wouldn't ever want to let go.
So, my point is, I am surprised. First is why Sophia and Count are in different places. They don't
that is what I was surprised about.
Sophia is in Paris and Count is in Idlehour. And second is for me. Would be Victor helping the Count, right? Victor actually went out of his way and helped Count, create that, in that border place. I don't know how to pronounce that, vibe or wherever the border of Poland or Finland.
Finland and Russia.
Finland and Russia, and Victor helped. And one more point. Okay, twist points. I think these are the points. Otherwise, so
See,
it
I
was
was surprised about the Sophia thing also, about how he had planned the entire thing for Sophia, and she had left. And after she left and she got to the American embassy, I was even more surprised that Alexander Rostov and she did not meet up. So that was really surprising for me.
Yeah.
I was also a little surprised when I got to know that he transformed from just a tenant under house arrest to a worker in the
Yes, a
restaurant.
head waiter. Yes, I missed that point. Yes.
How he fits, like he definitely fits perfectly as the very seasoned waiter, head waiter. But it was a little surprising to me. Like it seemed initially, at least, that even though he doesn't acknowledge his privileges as an aristocrat, but he has it in his
inherently
blood and his brain that like I might just be ahead of, like I might just be above all of these people, and I can't be a waiter to them. I might give the occasional suggestion that this might go,
counsel and
but I'm doing it because I have a higher etiquette than you. But I was very surprised, like pleasantly surprised, when he transformed so gracefully to the new role.
Yeah, I mean, the quote that I keep coming back to is that if a man does not master his circumstances, then he is bound to be mastered by them. Right? It is like the count is supposed to be the living like personification of this quote.
See, on a smaller note also, I was also surprised when Count got to Bishop's room and took the pistols and was threatening him. That was very surprising. I was like, what? How did that happen?
Because for 30 plus years, he was silent. He was silent.
And I was also surprised that he was getting into rooms and stealing. So I was like sure that he was doing it out of desperation. And I was sure that he was doing it so that most of them could leave the country together. And that's why at the end it was all more surprising that they did not.
And one more thing that surprised, how he in the beginning when Richard asks Count to spy for him, he refuses. He says, but that somehow was very cliched for me because it felt like an American movie where finally the American has to come and save the day, right? Like Count, he actually spies for his country. I won't say spy, but obviously he leaks that information about the political system to Richard, who is like a CIA guy, right? So it's like a cliche. You see so many American movies, right, where Russia is the villain and the Americans are the hero, and finally American saves the day. The American CIA saves the day, right? Like that. I found it very cliche.
But
do not forget that the writer is an American.
I think that was the impact. Because otherwise, I wouldn't have expected that the Count is going to, betray his country, even though he doesn't like the current government and the Bolsheviks and stuff like that. Maybe that could have been the motivating factor, apart from obviously that.
I think it was more of the Mishka's letter and everything that was a motivating factor.
And the way he shoots Stalin's photo, right, in Bishop. That was something I didn't expect him. I thought he was very he's someone who won't go against the government. He's okay, whatever is happening, he's accepting that. But it shows the anger.
I think one of the motivating factors for him to tell the Americans about the plan was that he wasn't very pro the government, and even within the government there was a lot of tumult. Like they weren't stable enough themselves.
One thing is I don't. The strongest motivation was protecting Sophia. I think it was. The rest of it is just like a.
I think and Mishka's
backdrop,
death,
right? Because he may have taken the offer right then and there, right, when the Richard first offered. Only when he knew that he could actually protect Sophia from here, he took up Richard on his offer. He did not.
I think it was Mishka's death also, the unfairness of it. How much Mishka suffered, and when Katrina, that's what it said. It started when Katrina, after the conversation with Katrina, right? Now here comes a very subtle point of nationalism. When we use the term betray, that's a very strong word. It's like you have cheated someone, like them. But is this truly nationalism? Like what? I'm not saying, like, what I'm trying to say is when we say the term betrayed country, he actually did. Does he imply that he was not a nationalist?
I think in this case it does, because it was very actionable, factual information that he was giving to the established, the opponent of his own country,
War,
right?
yeah.
So
It was a Cold War time.
I think you can definitely call it a national betrayal. I don't
Okay.
think there is much debate in that.
See, the point is that if you're betraying, like for me at least, if you're betraying a government, does it mean that you're betraying a nation? That's the
No,
bigger
that
So
question.
is
in
the
this
point.
case, it does, right? In this case,
How?
it does.
Yeah.
Suppose I I don't want to take India example. Let's say I am taking the India example, right?
Okay, cool.
Even if I don't agree with the current government or whatever, I hate the government. I hate everyone the current government, right? Even in that case, I won't give out the location of India's nuclear silos to Pakistan, right?
For sure. Yeah,
I won't
that's
give
what.
out what the meetings the prime minister and the defense minister are having with each other, right? So
He did not give out
I
the
know
detail of the nuclear locations, right?
he
Yeah.
it is on the similar it is
Yeah.
on the same spectrum,
Hmm.
right? I wouldn't give out the detail of the meetings with the prime minister and the defense minister and the navy admiral if they are having a meeting. I won't give out that detail to Pakistani whatever people because they promised
No.
me
So,
something.
like,
And
okay,
even
So
like Vivek, I understand that you are trying to say that, that he didn't give any material information. He just told them about, how he thinks
The
the structure
dynamics.
is going to change.
Huh.
Exactly,
Yeah.
dynamics.
exactly, yeah.
yeah,
But
but
then I also stand with Piyush in that sense that, when the structure of like the government of a country is changing so quickly, and there's a lot that can be
Uncertainty
made
and
out from that kind of a dynamic change as well. So
Exactly.
I
So,
Vivek, it's to just give another analogy is, for example, there's going to be an election in US, right? It's going to be Biden versus Trump. So now if Russia now there is internet, right? If at that time this was going to happen and Russia knew that Trump is the guy for them and Trump is going to run, they can try to influence the elections, right? So
see, that is the
even
point, right? I agree. I totally agree. But that is
Mhm.
the point I'm trying to make here. So, what I'm trying to tell here is that what if I know that, like, the guy that I am supporting and the person who will actually be supported by US is the person who will actually run the country better. Like, for example, if right now I'm comparing with India, if
for
I know
you
that
to
Modi is
decide
there,
that.
no.
yeah,
yeah,
Why
so
Vivek,
you
it's a
There-
personal thing, right? You cannot,
yeah,
like, for me, like, for example, if someone likes Trump, someone hates Trump, the Trump haters say, I'll go collude with China and make sure Trump
Yes.
isn't elected. It
And
doesn't make
for
sense,
them,
right?
and I at least I
so
believe that in this
mhm.
context, it wasn't about Russia getting led by the person that the US supports or otherwise. It was more about how US can use that information
Yes.
for the
yes,
Cold
to
War?
yes,
make their way into Russia and gain more power. Their point wasn't that, oh, जिस बंदे को मैं support करता हूँ, that person comes into power.
Yeah.
No,
I was just
they
moving on.
wanted to know which person will come into the power so
Now,
that they can sort of predict or
yeah,
make
actually,
a
it's the
game
Cold
plan.
War era, right?
Ah,
Russia and US
so
Cold
that
War
is
era.
like, how is that
Let me
betrayal of a country? That's my question.
I think
So
I just want to
no,
add
you
here.
are not.
I
Sorry,
just
please
want
So
to
go
add here that
one thing is that
every
you the any whatever your position is, whatever your whatever result you want from the government, right? No foreign party should be allowed to influence the way
Yeah.
your country's
You are
government
not
runs.
supposed to leak the classified information, as simple as that.
Yeah,
It's any
that
classified
is
information. If you are
yeah,
leaking, it's against your nation.
yeah,
We are no one to decide if it's right or wrong. It's a norm. Like, if you are giving out any classified information to someone, like it happened in India also, right? Go back again, Rahul Gandhi, like 2 years back, he went and met the Chinese envoy on the sidelines. So he wasn't supposed to do that, but if he's doing that, it's not right. And even people from his own political party said it's only the head of state should be allowed to meet the envoys,
So
right?
I
So
just want to add here, Pratul,
yeah.
we are saying from, as I mentioned, the term nationalism is a very sensitive term, which brings out different feelings for different people. And there's no correct way of following and not following that. But now imagine the Crown situation. A man, he has been, okay, let's start with the Bolshevik government. Yes, I just, let me just
yeah.
add
Go
to
ahead.
that.
Go ahead.
Now, when the government came into power, they were supposed to be the government of the people, Communist Party, everybody equality. That's what the Communist Party is, right?
Yeah.
What happened? People suffered. Different people suffered.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not talking about Count suffering. I'm talking about the suffering of the
Makes
common
sense.
people.
Makes sense.
Suffering of dissent. People like Mishka or many others who were sent away to Siberia for life, to work, to do hard labor. right? So people suffered. Did not allow a single voice of dissent. They did not allow people to leave the country. See, people are suffering in that regime also, right? After that, now Count has been in house arrest for 30 plus years. In his situation, now imagine you in his situation, right? Count knows, as he mentioned, I have just marked the paragraph also. When he's spying, the writer says, like, don't, now why are you judging the Count when he's spying, right? There's a paragraph.
The waiters
Just
are
the
supposed
duty
to.
of, it's the duty of the waiter to actually listen to what they are talking. That is his duty, right? So that shows the author's bias, like, in a way.
Yes.
Right? So imagine you are in a position of Count. You have seen your friend die. He has spent his 20 plus years in hard labor in Siberia. Count understands that people around him are not in the best of their face. Like, there is so much suffering all around him. Plus, he himself has been in house arrest. In that position, a man like him, it's a very moral question. If you were him, would you have done that? Would you have sold your state's secret to protect your doctor?
Okay, let's go one by one. Let's just answer this question one by one, right? I would have taken up Richard's offer in the first go.
Exactly.
I wouldn't have even thought about anything else.
Okay, so that is
it was implied that the Richard's offer, it implied that he could get Count and maybe Sophia as well out of Metropole and out of Russia at that time. So I would have taken up
in exchange of information.
In exchange of information, obviously, I would have taken up that offer at the get-go. I wouldn't have cared about whatever the country and whatever.
No nationalism for you. It's like personal. Abhi nationalism gaya bhad mein.
I would give much more importance to a family person. So in this case, Sophia, and than whatever happens to nation. Whatever happens to my family is much more important than whatever happens.
And then what is there for the nation, right? That is
that is my thing.
I think maybe Pratul can go. Yeah.
So Anu, my point is, if he's being a nationalist, okay, why does he want to take something in return for what he's doing? No, if Richard's offer was, you only give me information and I will help your country improve. Okay, if my answer at that time is yes, then I'm a nationalist. If my answer is no, I won't give it to you. I'll only give it to you if you help me and my daughter escape. At that time, I might be a nationalist, but I'm thinking about my personal gains before I'm thinking about my country's. Is what?
So what that does not mean you're betraying your country.
I would if I were there, I would. I think I would think about the country before Sophia. Yeah.
So you would have stayed there your life without doing anything about it, like with your daughter.
I would have done what Count did. I would have informed Richard about it, but not only because it would have helped Sophia escape.
So what Pratul is saying is that giving out this information to the Americans, he considered it to be beneficial to the Russian people.
Yeah.
And that is the moral reason why he would do it.
I would do it because it would benefit the people around me and not only me. Because right now, Count's motive is diluted because it is helping Sophia directly, right? That's why, that was my point, that if he was being such a nationalist, he could have done it when Richard had just given him a simple offer. Why not do it at that time?
No, I think that Count realizes that whatever information he gives out to Richard, that is not going to help Russian people. It will be used by the although Richard implies that he only wants to know what will happen, who will come up in the government and all this.
It is clear that Americans are not doing it to help Russia. They want to kill their competition. That was the Cold War era, right? Yeah. So
they want to take over Russia in a way.
They want to kill that economic. China war, economic trade war ho raha hai. So Pratul, you know clearly Americans are not doing it to help Russia. They want to defeat Russia in that economic trade war.
फिर तो point ही नहीं बचा ना, फिर तो जो count कर रहा है that is मतलब वो nationalist है नहीं, तो point ही नहीं बचा. If we are all clear कि जो information हो रहा है उसके बाद से Russia का उससे
that is the conflict, right?
See, that's the conflict.
That's the question I asked you. What would you
like? How the point is that how does the information that the Count give help America to beat Russia?
So it's not just his information, right? So like they would have had 100 different sources of
Spies
information
everywhere. Yeah.
in Russia, and when they collate all that information is when they would have some actionable insights. Is what I
That
think.
builds the whole
that is the
story.
point, right?
Yeah.
That is the idea of it. Like what I'm saying is, if for me somebody's asking me for an information which does not bear a consequence, that would be like what he said, maybe destruction of my defense or something that's so catastrophic, and instead I'm getting an opportunity to help out someone of my family get out of their life in such a situation that I am living in, I would definitely choose supporting my family member over that, because there is no catastrophic consequence because of the information that I'm giving.
But do
So
you think
Also,
Count?
it's I think the marginal addition of the information that the count is giving, because as Piyush said, obviously they would have like hundreds of spies scattered around the country. So if you look at it
Mm-hmm.
from a marginal addition point of view, then also you do feel like, you know, like I should put my family first, which is what I would also believe in, that
Yeah.
I'd put my family first.
Yeah. So there is a great quote from Nicholas Nassim Taleb, the author of Black Swan and Anti-Fragile. He says that I'm communist with my family, I'm socialist with my friends, and so he goes about. I don't know all the terms, but he goes about all these different terms, and in the end, I'm libertarian when it comes to the national government. And that is probably true for everyone else, right? With our family, we are actually communist. We would share everything, right? With our friends, we are socialist,
and yeah, we would determine what's best for them also.
yes.
I just want to add that I don't think Count यहाँ पे nothing is described in the novel of whether Count weighed his moral options, the information that I am giving, how much impact it
Yeah.
will have.
So
Clearly, it is very sensitive information. He tells them obviously that Russia has become a nuclear power, right? That is a very big information. Like Russia started generating energy from nuclear power plant. That is the
yeah.
first. So that's a very big
Mhm.
information, right? And second, who was most likely going to be the Russia's president or whatever, and his aides, right? So
Mhm.
Count has clearly given very sensitive information to the US government. So
And I
Count
think with the way he gives it also, you know, there's an air of secrecy and extreme importance
so
around
he
it.
understands that.
It
But at
shows,
this
yeah, exactly.
but at this point, there's nowhere mentioned that he's actually weighing the implications. Oh, when I give this, what will be the impact? I think he's just thinking with his heart.
So yeah, this goes back to another thing that I wanted to explore, is that certain parts of the Count story and especially Count's thinking are intentionally left out from the book. A simple example is that when Count tries to convince Sophia to go to Paris, right? Only his first argument is said, and that is where the chapter ends. What discussion they have, how Count finally gets to convince Sophia, right?
That I might add, like
that is.
Even I was surprised कि इतना सब कुछ करवा लो इस छोटी बच्ची से. मतलब it was such a big risk. She's surrounded by 2 KGB officers,
yeah,
right? And she has to slip out of that and color her hair and and become a boy. So I think I was very surprised that Count actually made his daughter do that. I don't know.
And one thing, like it's a little off the topic when we're discussing these things here, but I really like how the Count has so much presence of mind. He remembers when years ago, when during the 20s he used to go to the barber shop, and there was whoever was the head, exactly, and how he connects both of these things. He's like, after 30 years is going back there just to steal it. Like he goes there regularly as a customer, but it's there in the back of his head that, you know, that gray strand from the time when she hit her head on the staircase, how that also needs to be hid well, and what can be done about that, because obviously these kind of dyes and stuff like that weren't that common at that point in time. And he sets the tone very early on. When you think, oh, this is just a minute detail, he's just talking about things like he usually does, and you're like, oh, this is such an information overload. Why is he even mentioning this with so much detail? And then at the end, you're like, that's why.
It's like Shawshank Redemption, like that's
yeah,
what I felt.
and another good thing is that it's typically a property of movies, is that so it is a saying that a gun that appears in first act is shot in the third act, right? So but that does not happen with all the detail that is provided in the book. So like just to
Of course,
give the example, the detail about the size of the window in his room, right? Even though it is so much of detail that is never mentioned.
Actually, I have written somewhere that I have written that what are the things that have come back. Summoner, right? What Nina picks up, it is mentioned again when he's having the last dinner with Sophia. She keeps that silver lady, and Sophia asks, "What is this?" And she rings it. Like that's the summoner that Nina had picked up. Then regarding the tipping of the king, right? He had mentioned that sentence with Nina, and in the end, he mentions with Sophia, right? Count decided to tip off his king when they are playing that final quiz.
Yeah.
So these are things that have come up, and obviously that Casablanca reference, that though is very yeah.
Right.
What?
So one thing that I wanted to discuss, maybe we can just do it in like quick, is the Mishka's creation, the bread and salt.
Oh,
So it's something that would be very easy to do right now. A 10th standard graduate today can sit on Google and buy some books on Kindle and make it, but it would have been a very big effort at that time. Obviously, the actual author probably did it using Google and what we are talking about it right now. But it is, I think it, like I probably, if I were a very well-read person in any of the literature, right, I maybe would be interested in something like this, where just bread, right, and it is taken from whatever the oldest historical reference to bread till the most recent one in the
one that got him where he is, like the satire. I don't know the right English word here. The satire or whatever, because it's that part bread that he refused to move from his letter. That is the reason he was sent off to Siberia, right?
And then he had to like let go of it at that point, and then he came back to it. He's like, no, it is important for me, and I need to show it to people. I need to put it out there. And then he created
you don't know why that bread wala paragraph is so important to him early on, because you don't know what the final creation is going to be, right? So earlier it seems like ki kya hai, bread ka theek hai, hata do,
bread and salt,
chill hai.
Finally, when they reveal that part which he was asked to take out, and Mishka refused. So that's what said. So that's very brilliantly, like it's a circle, right?
And
so,
how like since we're talking about circles, I also believe how the poem that Mishka thought that, you know, like writing this would get me killed is what actually saved another person's life. And in the end, Mishka was killed because he didn't publish it under his own name, and he saved his friend's life.
One thing is that it puts another thing into a perspective is when Mishka says to the Count that you are the luckiest man in the whole of Russia, right? Okay, last question. Would you read the next book from this author?
I would definitely. In fact, Rules of Civility is on my list. Like it's actually he put it before, like that was his first famous book. But I would want to read more books by this author. Well, I really like how this also increases my knowledge about other things in the world. It's not just a random XYZ book, even though it's fiction, which is like that's what, like increasing this amount of knowledge about other things in the world is rare with fiction, like with work of fiction. Exactly. So I believe that the way he writes things, it would make me a more enriched person. And in fact, even Rules of Civility is based in like earlier New York, like early times New York. So I would definitely read more work by him.
I would read this author's book just purely of the way he writes things. Like maybe I've not read many books. Maybe that is why I feel it is so elegantly written. I was just trying to. I had jotted down some points of what I like. It is so elegantly written. Like I can actually feel. It's like जो हो रहा है. First I thought it was a little boring. कि सब कुछ. Then I realized it is so elegantly written. The emotions, the situations. You actually feel like reading, and I think that I can maybe try to pick up the words that he has used or the way he has expressed things. So that is one of the reasons I would want to read the other book and say, okay, has he written in the same way? Yeah. So that is the reason.
I believe he would. He's written a teaser, like he put in a teaser of Rules of Civility at the end of this book.
I'm a bit confused. Like I am not very sure if I'll read a book by him again. Well, I think this is the best book that he has written.
But you have not read the other book, no?
And no. I did look up. So the point is that This is the book for which he has received maximum appreciation and claim and recognition also. So the other books have not received, and like Rules of Civility is the one book that is actually like received at least
He has only
somewhat
written
close.
two rules.
No. He's written 4 books.
Four.
Yeah, but
Rules
they're
of
not
Civility.
proper. I think they're not
Yeah,
proper.
the others are not like proper books.
Yeah, they're
Rules
more
of
like
Civility
short
is
stories or
yeah.
reports and stuff. They're not report, I'd say, but I'm forgetting the word. But they're not proper novels, basically.
Okay. So like, because for me, like Dan Brown is like also a person who used facts and wrote books, and it was very one-dimensional. I do not know how his next book would be. So I'm like a little bit skeptical just because of that fact. Like I would rather wait for somebody else to tell me how it goes rather than just start again. Because if it's in similar lines, I wouldn't want to read it.
Yeah. So I also wouldn't want to read his next book, except if it is part of some book club or something.
Okay.
I think if I would have read this book itself, also like in one go, just me by myself, I think the experience would have been much less enjoyable than what we've had, and it would have been below the threshold of what I would consider ki, theek hai, what should I?
A good book.
Yes.
No, so not a good book, but something that I enjoy reading. Of course, it's a good book, and again, as I've said earlier as well, I compare these kind writings to if I could write something like that, right? So obviously, this is well above, like orders and orders of magnitude above what.
I think that would be the case with generally people as well. Like he's put in so much effort into writing the right historical fact, to researching generally about clothes, about the kind of food that was there at point in time. Because even though he might have a very smart culinary etiquette about what's going on right now, but he did put in a lot of research and effort into ensuring what was happening at that point in time. That should be correct historically too.
Yeah.
For me, it was the humor and wit. Like it's a very that's what has impressed me. Humor and wit is how he has.
I think more than the book, the character of Count has impressed Anu more.
Yes, yeah, that is there. But that is there. That was given.
Discussion number 1. Then she's like, "Oh, I would like to date somebody like the Count."
But as I mentioned, these men don't exist anymore now. So, so I would just do with the fictional character, and obviously, and it's a sheer delight. So I just want to, as we are concluding this, I want to add the book has been a sheer delight. It was like a hot chocolate, like melting. You feel, well, that's how it has been. It's not a serious book. It's a very witty, like humorous book, and obviously it covers many serious facts. Like we have discussed so many things with the book as background, but the book in itself was a sheer delight.
I believe this is something that could become a classic over time.
One thing is about becoming classic, right? There is a thing called Lindy effect, wherein if you write a book, if a book has been popular for 20 years, it's likely that it will be popular for next 20 years. If it has already been popular for 40 years, it is likely that it will be popular for next 40 years. Because the book is set in 1920. So even if the author would have written a book in 1970s, right? Even at that time, it would have been a popular novel.
Yes.
He wrote it in 2069. At that time, also, it is a popular novel. There is good chance that this novel would remain popular for a long time to come.
Yeah. This is a novel that I can pick up any time and read. Like such a life. Like I can just pick up just to say how something has been expressed. Okay, this is
I wouldn't read it from start to finish again, though.
Like it's like a movie. Like we watch Andaz Apna Apna. Like you watch it like any time. Kabhi bhi you'll still feel happy.
I do read books multiple times as well. Like, I like reading some books multiple times.
Same.
I'm going to reread Tactfulness again. But I don't think I'd do that with this book. I'd maybe read a few excerpts of it, or I'm just sitting, I don't have anything to do right now, I'll read a couple of pages, feel good about it. But I'm never going to read it from start to finish like Piyush watches
Office.
Yeah. So coming back to what Anu you said, right? Ki it's like a hot chocolate. So yeah, I did feel that way, right? The harsh parts were carefully sidelined into.
They were like in a background. It has been.
He like
tagged very neatly.
Yeah. So like starting the book, I would have expected, like, because I just went through the index and all those years, right? So I actually was ki theek hai, World War II would be a big part of the book and how people suffered and what this and this. Even though it is a emotional book, it does not dwell for a long time in the negative side of the emotions.
Maybe that's
Yeah,
So
definitely.
and that I think makes it a easier read in that sense that
yes.
you are not sad while reading the book.
Book.
The
No.
There are
emotional
books,
investment
yeah,
that way is lesser.
yeah.
It's more popular because of it, I feel.
Yeah, it's probably definitely. And
I think generally also it happens that like like the overall tone of your work of fiction, like if it ends well, like you always say all's well that ends well.
but
So
that is not true.
it's not true, but I'm just saying.
It's just
Yeah.
fiction. That line is fiction, and that's what I expected of fiction
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
Look at
Exactly.
movies
No,
that
but
have a very bad ending. It normally does not.
there are like books that probably people would consider objectively better writing and better literary works, which are tragedies, where the for most part of the book the characters are going through some sort of suffering. Not that the count is not going through any sort of suffering, but the perspective of the book and the perspective of character itself is that he is generally like it is in a light mood, or it is that you are happy while reading the book. So if anyone of you have read this Life's Search for Meaning, the Viktor Frankl, so he was
Man's search for meaning. Yeah, it's
what?
very nice. Man's search for meaning, right?
Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah. The Viktor Frankl. So he was in a Nazi concentration camp, a psychologist who was in a Nazi concentration camp.
Yeah.
And then he used that experience to develop his own theories, psychology. So even though that is a good book by many references, the story itself is very tragic, and he does not try to paint it over as a happy thing. So of course, you cannot paint over your experience in a concentration camp, but reading that book, while reading that book, you are really very sad and very depressed.
And it takes more time to read that book because it took me almost a month, and it's a very small book. Okay, like it's this big, like in length also it's much smaller than this, and I think it's less than 200 pages.
Yeah, it's very small.
It's a heavy book, like you feel.
It takes more out of you to read that book.
I get that.
That's why it's not popular. That's what I meant. Like if you have to actually be popular, like it should. If you need more massive recognition,
I wouldn't say popular, but I would say, like, I somehow feel that popular is not the right word to use over here.
I think, for example, Diary of Anne Frank, if you know, it does not talk about the sufferings. Right? I have not read it because I don't usually read books from the World War II era because I feel that they would give. So that's how I had I have a personal story to that. So I remember like why did you have not read that book? I was like, I don't want to read this. But my cousin told me that there is no suffering written that I don't think she has mentioned any sort of, obviously it's her in how she is in captivity and whatever it is. You know that these things have happened to her, but I don't think she's mentioned that in that diary. But still I never had the courage to read it. But even though it's a very popular book, Diary of Anne Frank is one of the most read books.
Did we have something regarding that in our coursework also, like a few part of it?
I think CBSE maybe had something like that, Diary of Anne Frank. But yeah, that's also, it's a very popular book.
Okay, so let's close this.
Yeah.
I think Aishwarya is. Oh, yeah.
Guys,
Okay.
no, I'm here. To close on a funny note, on a trivia about Diary of Anne Frank. It's very highly edited. Please, like, if you want to go ahead and Google about it, just Google on what all are the things that have been edited out of a book, because it's a diary. It's an actual diary of a 13-year-old girl. A lot of things have been removed from it because they weren't very appropriate for school kid reading.
Okay.
So just look it up. It'll be funny.
Okay. How romantic relations are what you're saying, is it?
Not really.
Okay, let's keep it. Let's keep this intrigue. Yeah.
And we have successfully concluded our first book. Yes, I'm so proud of all of us who have completed the book. And thank you, Aishwarya, Saloni, all those people who kept quiet for weeks. Despite having known the ending, it must be so difficult. And
Yeah.
those who have not read, do read this book. It's a sheer delight. Something that you would not generally pick up, but once you start reading, then it would be like awesome. You will never regret reading this.
Vivek, what was that realization that you
No, I just read the Anne Frank wala part. I understood.
Acha. Okay, ठीक है. Let's keep that a mystery for now. And ठीक है, चलो. Goodbye. Good night.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Great
Bye,
experience.
guys.
Yes.